I'm Anish Andheria. I head the Wildlife Conservation Trust. I have been a conservationist for the last 25 years. My basic degree is in fluid mechanics. My PhD is in fluid mechanics, but I also went on to do my master's after my PhD in wildlife biology and conservation. Um, and I've been heading Wildlife Conservation Trust since it's started operating on the ground in 2009. So it's almost now more than 13 and a half years. And we are about 85 people, and we work across several landscapes in India in more than 160 national parks and sanctuaries and about 23 states.
You've served as the president of Wildlife Conservation Trust for more than a decade. What are some of the notable highlights within your tenure?
Oh, well, there are, see, conservation is a long-term game. So while our successes, there are many successes, but success is temporary, failures are permanent when it comes to conservation. So we have been able to catalyze uh, upgradation of several forest areas to the level of sanctuary. We have been able to give scientific inputs so that the government could expand the borders of several, the core of tiger reserves. We have also been able to catalyze the declaration of buffer zones outside several tiger reserves. So we have been able to influence some level of protection in almost 8,000 square kilometers of central India. That's, I would say, is a sizable contribution when it comes to securing land
That's commendable.
for nature, for biodiversity. We have also been able to kind of do several projects on ground to reduce human-wildlife conflict. One of the most important one, and the one that's very close to my heart, is of the water heater project, where we have distributed, obviously not distributed alone, the communities have bought. There is a subsidy of 75%. So 75% is put in by WCT. A lot of it is donor money, and 25% is put in by the community. So there's a buy-in, and this particular project is making life easier for women in these rural areas, which are surrounded by forests and also wildlife. As a result, their visitation to the forest to collect fuel wood has gone down by 30-35%, which in turn has reduced the interface between large carnivores and them. So a lot of villages have come forward to adopt this particular water heater. They're willing to spend 1,850 rupees for this. And the most significant thing is that even during COVID, we saw that there was no drop in the purchase of the water heater. So we were worried that during COVID, because the economy of such poor areas had actually, collapsed, but people wanted the water heater. They felt far more secure with the water heater. And there was a lot of research that has gone in. Almost 2 years of research led to this project. So these two projects, but there are several other things. The human-wildlife conflict work that's done by our veterinary doctors is fantastic. We have been able to rehabilitate several tigers in the wild, which means capture them, put a radio collar, and then release them, and then monitor them till they become used to the natural environment wherever they have been released. The linear infrastructure projects, where our researchers have gone in and collected a lot of data on animals that were crossing highways, and when these highways were expanded, which means the 2-lane highways were expanded to 4-lane and 6-lane, our research basically resulted in the government building or at least agreeing to build underpasses on these highways, which means that the government agreed to build these bridges so that vehicles can go on top while the wild animals can go below. And as per the directive of the government, the road, the existing road which is below the bridge, has to be removed. And the first of those bridges is already up. just to the north of Tadoba. So that's a very big success because our inputs in these projects were insignificant in terms of money compared to how much the government is spending on building these underpasses and overpasses. So if you make research and science the foundation of your work, government also feels comfortable to take on your suggestions. Just hearsay or passion-driven dialogue with the government doesn't help. You have to back it with science, and that's what I think WCT stands for.
Commendable. It's absolutely commendable. So, other than the human-wildlife conflict that you mentioned, what are the other major roadblocks when it comes to wildlife conservation in India, and how can the common masses or a common man help preserve threatened species in their habitats?
There are several hurdles to conservation in India. Human-wildlife conflict is a result of conservation, actually. The human-wildlife conflict was much lower in the 60s and the 70s, that is 1960s, 70s, 80s, because wildlife population had collapsed. There was a lot of hunting at the time. The British kept hunting till 1947. A lot of species, tigers, cheetahs, leopards, elephants were hunted down then. And after they left, Indians continued to hunt because they left behind a lot of ammunition. And also, they passed on that game hunt, this passion for game with the Maharajas and all that. So that continued. So by 1960-70, the wildlife really population had collapsed. Rhino populations, elephants, everything. So for almost 2 generations, people had not had the experience of wild animals around them in the true sense of the word, because they could shoot something. If a tiger walked into a village, they could easily shoot it then. But since 1972 and the Declaration of Wildlife Protection Act, all that was banned. And since then, the populations of herbivores, that is pigs, cheetah, that is spotted deer, sambar, and therefore large carnivores has steadily gone up. India has in fact doubled the tiger numbers from what it, so in 2006, there were 1,411 tigers. And by 2018, that population had touched almost 3,000. So India had doubled tigers, and simultaneously elephant populations, rhinos, lion populations had also gone up. So because of that, the interface between large mammals and people went up. And so conflict incidences went up. So that, of course, is a big challenge. But I think conservation per se, if you look at, finally, species conservation is a byproduct of conservation of ecosystems, which means unless you have good quality wetlands and rivers, you will not have dolphins, you will not have crocodiles.
Definitely.
You will not have mahseer, which is a very, very endangered fish in India. If you don't have good quality deserts, then you will not have the wild ass, you will not have the desert fox, you will not have the species like the Habara bustards, which are found there. Similarly, if you don't have good quality trans-Himalayan areas, which is high altitude mountains with enough prey, you will not have snow leopards. So securing land is very important. And in India, where you are looking at 1.4 billion people and their aspirations and the need for the nation to develop, which means that the government is constantly trying to build roads, it's trying to provide water and electricity to as many people as possible. And in doing so, obviously there is huge amount of pressure on land, and when that happens, obviously if tomorrow Bombay needs water, you will not have a dam in the middle of the city. The dam will be built somewhere near the forest or inside the forest. So these developmental projects like dams, mines, linear infrastructure like railways, roads, electrical lines, these are the main causes for fragmentation of land. And when land fragments, animal populations get isolated, and in isolated population, it is known that there is a lot of vulnerability and animal populations can go extinct, because if there is no immigration possible, which means if animals cannot move between 2 forests, then if something goes wrong on one side, the population will collapse. So that's what happens.
Is there a middle way out? Is there a middle way out? Can we have some sort of equilibrium between conservation and development?
There is equilibrium in some places in India, in some, and others there isn't, and this is a global thing. And there, I think there is enough technology with us uh, to so that there is enough technology to ensure that conservation and development can go hand in hand. Some extra costs will have to be incurred, which means like mitigation structures on highways. So if a highway was built straight on ground, it will it will be cheaper. But if you build a bridge so that the vehicles can go on top, obviously that will cost. That's an extra cost and the burden on the exchequer. Similarly, if you have smaller dams, you will be able to allow reverse migration for fish, because fish goes up for spawning. In electric, when you look at power lines, you could go underground. So if there are power lines that are going on top, a lot of people are tapping those power lines, and then that electricity is used to electrocute pigs and deer when they come to graze on their crop fields. As a result, even tigers and leopards are dying. So you'll have to take these power lines underground, or you'll have to insulate them in certain insulated rubber. So all that is additional cost. However, technology is available to make that happen. You now have big earth moving machines. They can easily, and you can have machines that can bore a horizontal channel inside the ground without digging, which means that the upper surface is not going to get disturbed. You can work as a caterpillar into the ground and put the pipeline there. So if we use technology and we are willing to spend extra money, we will have solved conflict in the future. We would have solved the collapse of wild animals, and wild animals are extremely important for the ecosystems. You cannot have forests without animals, and vice versa. You cannot have wild animals without forests. You can have wild animals in the zoo, but they are of no use to the entire ecosystem. So animals are the gardeners of the Eden. They need to be protected for the forest to thrive as a healthy ecosystem. And from a forest like that, you will have better sequestration of carbon. You will have more purer water coming out of it. And in a country with 1.4 billion people, and where nearly 60% of these people are farmers, you can understand the importance of surface water, which means rivers have to keep flowing if these farmers have to cultivate. So India, so there are challenges. One is of the population, second is of development, third is of the kind of interface between wildlife and people, because wildlife and people live in a very closely packed mosaic. So it's not like half of India is forested and half of India is urban. The urban centers are right in the middle of forests also. There are villages which are around the forest, inside the forest. So in that kind of complex situation, you will have a higher interface and therefore conflict. So there are challenges. However, the culture of India, and that is, I think, the biggest talking point here, it makes India very different from all other nations, where India, we worship animals, elephants, tigers, even rats, monkeys, snakes. These are so intricately woven into the mythology. So people are God-fearing. People are vegetarian largely in a big part of India. And also we believe in reusing stuff. So, you know, in every family, you will not really have too much of trash going out. People keep using stuff in the house. So, so the culture and the way India has been over hundreds of years is a big plus point. And despite all these challenges, that is the reason why we still have very high levels of biodiversity in the country. It's because people are tolerant. People don't think of wildlife and forests as outside of their villages. They consider them as part of their culture. And I think that is the biggest plus point, and we must take advantage of that. So technology will definitely help, but we cannot allow our cultures to degrade, because the culture of the country, along with technology, I think will be able to solve a lot of our conservation problems in the future.
So since you brought technology into the conversation, I was reading few reports where AI is actually being used as a tool to enhance ecosystem mapping. Now, I was pretty naive to understand or decipher what it actually means, but it is actually being used in various countries. Can you tell us how it works, what it is, and how it works in wildlife conservation? And is it a viable solution for a country like India?
No, definitely. AI is used in several ways. AI is used to identify tigers from a million tiger photographs. Camera trap photos. There is camera trapping
Yes.
is used. It's a methodology used to estimate tiger densities. So camera traps are put in different parts of the forest. So one camera trap pair per 2 square kilometers, and India has 3.5 lakh square kilometers of tiger habitat. So really 1.75 lakh camera traps are put across the tiger habitats. They any pretty much anything that walks in front of those cameras is photographed, and so therefore there are millions of photos. Today AI is used to identify tiger photos from non-tiger photos, first of all, leopard photos from tiger photos. Once that is done, then within the tiger photos they can actually identify individuals. Then once all that is done, if tomorrow a skin is found in say Nepal or Bhutan, uh, and if photos are sent to researchers in India, just by those photographs, when they feed it in the system, AI helps in pinpointing that very location from where the tiger has been killed. So AI is definitely of great use as far as wildlife research goes. Even in conservation, AI is able to predict conflict, which means today, and we have used it in our projects as well, and we continue to do so. So we collect data, but it's impossible to collect data all through the year or in every single square millimeter of the forest. It is energy intensive, it takes too much time, and by the time you collect the data, the problem is already looking in your eyes. So with limited amount of data, AI allows, and that data, if you keep feeding the system improves. So every time that you feed data to the system becomes more and more robust, and therefore it can help you predict conflict in the future. So if you put certain variables as to these are the reasons why conflict is happening, and if you run that in through on the computer and you feed data in other areas of the same landscape, the system will allow you to predict which are the most vulnerable hotspots for the future, which means you can now be proactive in estimate in solving the problems before they happen. Mostly we are reactive, which means there is a conflict situation and somebody goes and tries to either capture the animal or appease people, but by that time there is already too much of unrest in people. People are angry, people don't like the fact that the government, the forest department was late and all that. So the best way to handle it is proactively, and AI definitely helps in this. AI can also help in estimating populations of several animals like ghadial, crocodiles. Once you start feeding data to the system, that the system is data hungry, and you have to feed quality data. But
Yes.
if you are able to do both these things, then the system will help you in you know will reduce the amount of effort that the team has to put in. So you get the answers faster, which means that you can find solutions on time.
So talking of WCT again, I've been hearing that it constantly gets in touch with and collaborates with indigenous people for wildlife conservation in India. How do they help in preservation of ecosystem?
So while we keep talking about the forest department and the government who's trying to protect wildlife, I think just the government cannot protect wildlife. It is largely the wildlife protection is a success in those areas where communities have contributed in a big way. As I told you, the culture, there is so much of folk in the people living around, say, Gujarat, where there are lions. There are more than 650 lions now in Gujarat. There used to be only 8 lions in 1883.
Yes.
From 8 or 18 lions, it is now, more than 140 years later, we have 650 lions. And only about 35 to 40% of those are inside national park. The rest are all living alongside people. And even when a lion kills cow or a buffalo, people don't get angry. So communities are definitely playing a big role. Wherever the wildlife population is high, you know that the community is far more tolerant. In fact, they are pro-wildlife. There are cases in Rajasthan where Bishnoi women have actually breastfed orphan antelope fawns.
Oh,
Right? So if the mother has died for some reason and a lactating woman in the village actually breastfeeds the baby, uh, for a sizable amount of time. And those things are, I mean, people don't get surprised when they hear about it. Even in tiger landscapes, Tadoba is a tiger reserve in Maharashtra. To the east of Tadoba, there are about 604 villages in forests, and there are about 75 to 80 tigers, both adults and cubs together, living alongside people. Nearly 50 people die of tiger attacks in that landscape. Over the last 2 years, we have seen almost on an average 45 to 50 people have been killed, and yet uh, there is hardly any case of poisoning, which means that people are not trying to kill those tigers that are there. Now, can you imagine anywhere on earth something like this can play out? It is only here when actually see for more than 5,000 cattle are being killed by tigers in that landscape between Tadoba and this area which is called Brahmapuri. So it's huge amount of loss when it comes to cattle. However, people don't poison tigers. People, I mean, when I say 50 people, it's not a joke. 50
yes.
people dying to tigers. 58,000 people in India die of snake bites every year, right? But I don't, when there is a snake in Bombay, I get a phone call, and there are several people like me who go and rescue snakes. And there's nobody who says, okay, there's a snake in my house and I want to kill it. They'll call you, said, there's a snake. Can you come in? We have shut the door. Come in as soon as possible and take the snake away. So this is what it is. So I think communities have a big role to play. We have to also, as the government, I think, needs to play a greater role in empowering communities, in making sure that their livelihoods start coming from non-forested area. Currently, a lot of communities are dependent on the forest for their day-to-day subsistence. For instance, they collect fuel wood for cooking, for heating water. They collect minor forest produce like fruit, like lichen, grass, a lot of other minor forest produce like bamboo from the forest for their subsistence. So government programs will have to ensure that this stops, not out of enforcement, not by enforcement, but by providing alternatives so that they can earn much more money without depending on the forest. Because if people continue to depend on the forest and the human population is increasing, the forest is shrinking, this is going to be like a big stress point for the forest, because over time the forest will degrade, biodiversity will fall, large carnivores will come in contact with people more and more. There will be a lot of deaths. Elephants are going to destroy a lot of standing crops, also injure people, kill people. And so the conflict that will emerge because of forest degradation will be the death knell for conservation in India. And to stop this, you have to make sure the communities who are already very tolerant and supportive of conservation, their livelihood has to be decoupled from the forest. They have to be given alternatives which can fetch much more money than what agriculture can. So I think that's the way to solve it. And I personally believe communities have extremely important role in conservation.
All right. So this another question. I firmly believe, and you can actually correct me if I'm wrong, but I am of opinion that India actually suffers from a conservation bias by channeling disproportionate funds to saving magnificent mammals and other species as compared to rest of other species in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, so there is a that happens across the planet. It's not about India. Money is not easy to come by, because when it comes to conservation, it is really not making profit for the government in a big way or for the corporate world. It is actually the foundation of life, but it is not tangible, because you don't know, you can't, there is no liquid money coming out of the forest. So by securing a tiger or securing a forest or securing a river, you don't earn money overnight. It supports human populations for hundreds of years. But while that is very important, it is impossible for a human brain to make sense of it. And our economy is an economy of give and take. So it's exchange of money. In conservation, it is only putting money into these projects to protect wildlife, but there is no direct return in money.
Yes.
There is oxygen, there is water, there are ecosystem services like pollination, germination, soil conservation, rivers, temperature regulation, minor forest produce creation. So these are all uh, ecosystem services, but they are coming to us in kind, and we cannot liquidate them. And so there is a concept that it's a waste of money, right? And so there is a disproportionate amount of money that is going into non-forestry activities, which means in industry, people want to invest in the banking sector, people want to invest in mining, people want to invest in developmental projects, right? But very little money comes into wildlife. So there is already less amount of money. Plus, corporate world wants to align with large mammals, with powerful animals, with carnivores. Because say if I was a a capitalist and I was running a firm and I want to have a logo for myself, I will not want to have a snake on the logo or a butterfly on the logo or a frog. I would want to associate it with an animal which is universally known as the most powerful animal. And so it will be either an elephant or it will be a whale or a shark or a tiger. And so it is also the perception that is there in the minds of people that is pumping more money towards them. But overall, conservation receives, I would say, 1/10 of the money that it deserves. The life on planet Earth is dependent on the ecosystems. However, the money going in supporting or protecting that ecosystem is infinitesimally small than what is required. So there is a lot of disproportionality there. When it comes to supporting large mammals, I say there is nothing wrong in it also, because if you are looking at tigers, then tigers are animals that live in large areas. A tiger, a female, will require almost 10 to 15 square kilometers of habitat. A male will require 550 square kilometers, and the range of a male could be as large as 200 to 250 square kilometers. So if I want to secure a tiger, I will have to protect a large area. And if I protect a large area, automatically trillions of insects, ants, termites, bats, butterflies, beetles, plant species will get secured. So in the name of these large I would say symbols of conservation, which are sharks, whales, dolphins, tigers, polar bears, monkeys like gorillas, chimpanzees. So these are iconic species that people want to support because they are large ranging, not so much the gorilla and the chimpanzee, but all these large mammals and marine mammals and mammals on Earth. You are indirectly supporting everything else. And so I personally feel there is a bias for sure, but that bias is not really creating a lot of issues. There are certain species definitely living in grasslands because certain ecosystems are being ignored, and that is a bigger challenge. Then I don't think I'm okay if a cheetah is symbolic and people want to support cheetah conservation because cheetah lives in the grassland. If I want to protect cheetah, the grassland has to be protected. If I protect the grassland, automatically wolves,
So I was actually
hyenas.
coming to that. What are your thoughts on this cheetah rehabilitation plan in India?
I think I am not a big fan of reintroduction of species that have got extinct, because I feel that there are reasons why those species went extinct, and those reasons are still existing in the country. However, now that the cheetah is there, then I feel that we have to take advantage of the fact that cheetah is iconic and that the government can be um, advised in the right way and pushed uh, so that they can allocate good quality lands, grasslands for the species. Cheetahs cannot survive. I mean, the best populations of cheetahs are in open scrub and grassland habitats. There are populations of cheetahs in Africa living in the woodland, but those densities are much lower. So if you want to back the cheetah project and ensure that there are about 150 cheetahs in the next about 10 to 15 years, then you will need about 10,000 square kilometers of good quality grasslands. And
Yeah, you
today
need
India
something
doesn't
like
have
savanna, which
you
we
need
are
savanna.
lacking here.
we had savannas, they've all been completely overwhelmed by agriculture, or they have been declared as wasteland. There is a wasteland map in India, Atlas, Wasteland Atlas. And most of the grasslands and scrubs are part of that wasteland atlas, which is basically wasteland in the books of the government. So when that happens, it's scary because you feel that because it's declared as a wasteland, then pretty much any project can come there. You could put solar panels there to generate megawatts of solar power. You could have windmills. So these are all considered as green technologies. But when you put it in areas which are open, then you are definitely having impacts on so many species of birds, like cranes, the common crane, the demoiselle crane, that migrate into these areas from other countries during the winter. Now, also several birds die of, they hit the windmills and die. Bustards, Great Indian bustard, Hobara bustard. It affects the grassland species. So cheetah can now be used to secure grasslands. India has lost nearly 200,000 square kilometers of grassland in the last 150 years. So with in the name of cheetah, if about 10 to 12,000 grassland square kilometers can be brought back, cheetahs would have done a great service to hundreds of species that live in these grassland areas. So for me, cheetah is just a conduit to get some grasslands back.
I guess we are running really short on time. So there's this quick question that I really want to ask you. As a biologist and a wildlife photographer, which you are, which place did you find the most captivating? And also, what does it take to organize and manage such a big organization, especially when you're heading it?
See, I am a generalist, which means I don't have as one favorite, because as you have understood, I love the forest. I was in Painch just 2 days ago. So, very, very beautiful woodlands, teak forest. Mornings are beautiful. I love them. But I feel equally excited when I'm in a floodplain like Kaziranga, where there is elephant grass. I love being in Ladakh, which is trans-Himalayan areas. Not a single tree, but all those rugged mountains there. I love to be in a scrubland. I love to be in a marshland. I love to be in the sea. I dive a lot. And so there is no one favorite of mine. There are several places which are wild. I think the question can be better answered by saying that all those areas where human imprinting is minimal is my favorite. So going to a sea and not finding plastic in there, and finding the biodiversity of fish, all from the shark to the frogfish, on different types of corals to, so sea cucumbers, then that's something that I love. On land, there are so many different places. I love Kaziranga, I love Corbett, I love Dudhwa, I love Painch, I love Nagarhole, I love Eravikulam, Great Himalayan National Park. So Gangotri National Park. So these are fascinating places, Sundarbans. So I feel at home in these places outside of home. So these are all homes for me outside home. And this is true wherever I go. So, and being a conservationist and somebody who loves wildlife, we are fortunate because we never feel that we are too far away from home. So if I was in Africa and I was in South Africa, say in Kruger, it looks so similar to Kuno and so similar to Gir that I don't feel like I'm out of place there. So I feel connected to nature, and through nature, I'm connected to my nation as well. So that's the positive of being a conservationist. And as the second part of your question is whether how difficult it is, I don't think it's difficult unless if you know your goal, if you know that you want to make sure that large landscapes have to be secured, and if you go and you select the right people who work from, see, any organization is not, the leader is playing only, I would say, 5 to 10% of the role to making sure that the staff feels secure, that they can go out and follow their heart and not worry about funds. They are given the freedom to do what they want to do, as long as they are going in that particular direction, which the organization has decided through a collective process, right? So I had some ideas in my head. Then as people started being recruited in the organization, their ideas also tinged my ideas. And therefore, now what we have is a formula which is a very bottom up formula. And when you have great people who are self motivated, no amount of challenge is a challenge, because we work collectively. Today, we have economists, we have social psychologists, we have conservation biologists, we have lawyers, we have forensic scientists, we have law enforcement people, we have people from so many different, we have doctors as well. uh, and so there are people who are in different fields. We all come together and work as a think tank. And most of our projects is complex, and people look at it from different perspectives, and therefore the solutions that WCT comes out with are rounded, because it takes into consideration not just what a conservation biologist or a zoologist is thinking, but also from the social angle, also from the economic angle. So that's what WCT stands for. And I don't think it's difficult to run an organization where I have some great people on the ground.
All right, Anish, I guess the meeting will end in like 60 minutes. And before it does, I'd really like to thank you. It has been a pleasure. It has been a very informative session with you. And I'll have to rewind all this to know the details, the minute details that you came up with. And it was really pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you very much, Anish.
Thank you, Atish. It's been a pleasure. All the best to you for these series of interviews.